Let's start with honor.
All
How
right.
does understanding honor? I'm watching Shogun right now on FX, the new reboot that they're
Of
doing of
course you
that.
are.
And I've got to Disciple Dojo. I have to watch Shogun. I enjoyed the one in the 1980 more because it's a little closer to the book, but this one is very good. And the concept of honor in the Japanese setting, 15th century, 16th century Japan, is the dominant characteristic. So, what would be the New Testament concept of honor, and why was it? Why would it matter?
It's great that you went to feudal Japan. You could also go to most any Arab context
Hmm.
today and still find honor to be a primary value. And one thing that it seems to be the case is honor doesn't really have content of its own,
Hmm.
but where groups value honor, they tend to then seek to embody whatever values, whatever characteristics the group into which they were born
Hmm.
values and has value. It seems to be a basic, somewhat subconscious means of social formation and social control.
Hmm.
So, um, if I'm a first century person pretty much anywhere throughout the Greco-Roman world, I will typically be strongly oriented toward what other people think of me. And I will be consciously weighing in my own mind how well am I embodying what this culture of mine values
Hmm.
so that I can value myself in part. It's a bit different from our more individualistic
Right.
culture,
Right.
even though, as anyone's on social media can attest, we also form our little, groups of significant others,
Hmm.
without whom it's very difficult for us to retain whatever values we are trying to live.
Hmm.
I suppose the difference being we now pick our tribe based on what we want to be,
Hmm.
whereas in the first century, one's tribe basically determined what one was going to be.
Right.
And moving from that to some other kind of social identity was really difficult.
Hmm.
So I'm in first century Judea, and um, I'm born Jewish. I know that Torah observance, I know that living the life of the covenant is vitally important to being an honorable human being, not just in the sight of my fellow Jews, but also in the sight of the supreme significant other, God Himself.
Right.
I don't go far from Judea. I go up to Antioch in Syria, and I'm in the minority.
Hmm.
So I'm confronted quite regularly with a larger group that doesn't really think that what observance of the Mosaic covenant is important, and quite a few people who think it's just downright backward and stupid
Hmm.
because it has made of me an atheist as far as all the gods revered by all of my neighbors are concerned. And it's made me rather antisocial
Hmm.
because in order to maintain my own devotion to what I have been raised to believe to be honorable, I need to hunker down pretty much in the social circles of other Jews.
Hmm.
Um, and I will do that because because I am what I am in many ways dependent upon their reflecting back to me the value of Torah observance in order not to be drawn away by the scorn that now the majority in Syria and Antioch
Hmm.
have of me. Because I'm sensitive to that too. I'm sensitive to the the looks, the reproaches, the general sense the Jews are not honorable citizens because they don't value our gods, they don't show solidarity with us.
Hmm.
And I might very easily be drawn to leave my native set of values and practices if the reproach of the Gentile majority outweighs the support of the Jewish community.
Mm.
And that happens. Hence, we do see apostates in the Greco-Roman period.
And they even would go so far, sometimes, correct me if I'm wrong, wouldn't they go so far as to reverse their circumcision in order to fit in? Wasn't that
I do like to go for the kind of extreme and strange elements of the past.
Of course. That's what people tune in
Let's talk
for.
about epispasm. No. No. But they would, yes, they would.
I mean, just that's one example, obviously an extreme one, but of trying to move from one subculture into a more dominant culture to fit in, to blend in, or to get a better reputation among that group.
And now that you've gone there, we have to explain for your viewers, this is only because in the gymnasium of ancient cities, one tended to engage in athletics in the nude.
Yeah, naked workout.
And that's the place where, how shall I say, one's ethnic markers would become surprisingly evident in ways that it might not in the streets. Just so you know, this doesn't pertain to proving your identity as you walk into into a club room or the council chamber.
Yeah, right. But only and I've been kind of reviewing my Greek, because my Greek has dropped. My Hebrew is kind of in it, but my Greek is, so I'm trying to get it back up to par. And one of the words that came up the other day was gymnos, and it was for naked. And I was like, that's where gymnasium comes from. I'm almost positive
it is.
And it was just a fun. So I will never forget that word, vocabulary wise. Very easy cognate to remember, especially next time I go in the gym and everybody's wearing clothes. I'll be like, man, I'm so thankful for that social advance. But it's there. So tell me about, like, honor was such a big deal, and the people that they would choose either to associate, to gain honor among the dominant culture, Greco-Roman, or double down and gain honor among the subculture, Judaism. How did that, when you throw Christians into the mix, because they're another step removed into this kind of third culture, where does honor play? What role does honor play for them?
So fabulous. Christians have to work doubly hard because both the traditional Jewish subculture and the Gentile majority have reason to look askance at their life choices. And through the pages of the New Testament, you can see wherever Christians are being reproached, abused, marginalized in any way, that is the way in which one of these two other more dominant cultures is trying to exercise social pressure through shaming, through marginalizing, to, in large measure, reclaim or correct what they regard as deviant behavior in their midst. Think of the Gentile who becomes Christian. As a Gentile, I might look at Jews askance, but, they've always lived that way.
Right.
They at least have the pedigree of having, lived by the Torah for, let's just say, 1,200 years by the time we get to the first century. But when my Gentile neighbor and his household decide that all of the gods we worshipped together for years aren't really gods at all, and they're going to worship the God of the Jews, and especially celebrate some crucified revolutionary whom they seem to be saying is coming back to set up a kingdom that's going to displace all the powers that I rely on for secure and prosperous life here under the Roman peace. I'm going to fix that. I'm going to do whatever I can, and so will my neighbors, to fix that.
Right.
We don't need pockets of sedition and impiety in our city. That degrades the very honor of our civic identity. So throughout the pages of the New Testament, if I were to take y'all to a text, you and your viewers, y'all to a text.
Thank you for speaking Southern. This is the correct
Well,
dialect.
my wife makes me. Um, I would go to say First Peter. First Peter 4, 12 to 16. Peter is addressing largely Gentile Christians, whom he speaks to as former Gentiles. You've left that way of life behind. You've embraced a new life. And so there's a lot of identity formation in his letter. But then he'll say, and here I gotta open it up because having been raised Episcopalian, I've never really been good for memorizing scripture.
We'll put it on the screen for viewers so they can follow along as well.
Beloved, don't be surprised at the fiery trial when it comes upon you to test you as though something strange were happening to you. But rejoice insofar as you share Christ's suffering, so that you may also rejoice and be glad when his glory is revealed. If you are insulted for the name of Christ, you are blessed, you are privileged, because the Spirit of glory and of God rests upon you. But let none of you suffer as a murderer or a thief or an evildoer or as a meddler. But if anyone suffers under the name Christian, let him or her not be ashamed, but rather glorify God in that name. And there are clues throughout First Peter that the pressing need for this community is the pressure they're experiencing, the reproach, the alienation. In cases where an unbeliever has legitimate power over a believer, physical assault, think of non-Christian masters of Christian slaves, trying to apply this pressure to make Christians doubt that they've made the right life choices, to make them think, oh, I have taken a turn toward disgrace. It's clearly brought me into a place of relative disgrace from what I used to enjoy when I was a good God's-fearing member of this city. And so Peter, from beginning to end, is using strategies to help these believers understand, no, you have arrived at a place of genuine honor. Sure, your neighbors don't recognize it, and there are reasons for that. And we could look at the ways in which Peter talks about the way their neighbors are still mired in ignorance about God, the way they're still mired in immoral practices that should automatically disqualify their opinion of whether or not the Christians are honorable or disgraceful. And they have joined a community that is inherently a noble one. They are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a people of God's special possession. All these labels that were applied to Israel now applied to this group to say, look, you really are part of something special here. You have a greater dignity than you ever had before, even though for the current time, you're not experiencing that dignity reflected in those around you. You're experiencing shame instead, but that's okay, because that's exactly the path that Christ himself took on the way to the glory that he now enjoys through sufferings to glory. That's all in this letter, and all of that kind of tells us that Peter's own solution to the believer's problem is to appeal to their sense of honor, is to restore their sense of honor, and to let them know through the letter itself, and then hopefully through the behavior of Christians toward one another, reinforcing their commitment, reinforcing one another's commitments to Christ and to their hope. They're going to understand that their real lasting honor is tied to their perseverance and faithfulness to this dishonored group. So that would be one example.
Do you see honor as the concept of honor transcending all cultures? Do you think that's something that's innate and it's just a matter of what honor is being ascribed to or what people are seeing? Like even people, the reason I ask this is I see people on social media and stuff, they like to posture like, I don't care what anybody thinks about me. But they're posting that on social media, like that.
They're counting their likes.
Yeah. They're getting their honor from spurning the desire for honor, but that becomes in and of itself a subculture or an identity that they grab. And so do you think there are any cultures that genuinely do not have the concept of honor, or do you think it's across the board?
I haven't come across one yet, but in all fairness, I don't get out all that much.
You haven't explored every corner of the earth. How dare you?
And so, I mean, I want to leave open the possibility that it exists.
Right.
But the cultures that have that I've personally come across, even our own culture, as you've noted, we're social creatures. We need social affirmation to continue to hold to our own view of ourselves. And there's a wonderful, well, I think a wonderful sociological theorist, Peter Berger, who's also worked with Thomas Luckman on the social construction of reality. And that's the title of one of their books. And the other, just by Peter Berger, is The Sacred Canopy, how religion fits into social engineering of identity and knowledge and what have you. But they basically say, no one is an island. And we cannot for long hold views about reality or about ourselves that are not socially reinforced without being schizophrenic or otherwise diagnosable. So is that innate? I don't know. Is it a pretty constant kind of social formative element? Seems to be.
Yeah, I think about even people like the more existentialists, like escaping into the woods and living there for 5 years or whatever. There's still this in their writings, this appeal to this is an honorable thing to do, to shed society and forge your path alone. And that rugged individualism is still, you still hear appeals to it being honorable and not weird and misanthropic and misguided. I would be interested to know if there were any cultures that just had a completely upside down or backwards view of it. Because it seems, from what I've seen, it just seems across the board. And I think it's an easy concept for people. It's an easier concept for people to grasp once you sort of bridge the gap between the time frames and say, okay, this is what modern Western individualist North Americans value and honor in general, and then show examples, which you do in the Greco-Roman world. And this is how they did that. But ultimately, it's appealing to that same sense of honor. And even when Jesus, I think of it like the phrase of him despising the shame is a way of flipping that on its head and saying, actually, what looks to be so shameful is actually the most honorable action. You just have to see it through the correct lens. But then again, there are cults today that do that with all manner of nonsense. And that's why they're so appealing to people, is you can get them to see, oh yeah, any attack, any rebuke from the outside, any of this is going to be because they're trying to turn you from the true path. And so you have to stay strong. And
unfortunately, those strategies are simply just radicalization of strategies that we can find in the New Testament.
Right. Yeah. So how do you, I don't want to spend all the time on honor. I want to move on to the other ones, but that's something to think about is how would we discern and helpfully shepherd people into countercultural faith without going the route of the radicalization and cult-like devotion that you do see creep into some churches. I don't know the answer to that.
Well, no, I wouldn't presume either to know. But since you raised the question, it seems a shame not to try to throw some things out there.
What do you have? I'm open to it.
Well, first, think about the full range of responses to the outside world that are represented in the New Testament. They're not all insular. Not all, whatever is said out there has nothing to do with us in here. There are a number of texts that actually encourage building bridges as opposed to raising the walls higher. Think about the ways in which New Testament churches created and sustained a network with one another, which is something that cults refuse to do.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they're cults. And so what we would call cross-denominational relations and interaction between multiple congregations, what early Christians took for granted, is a path to, I think, health.
Mm.
Where a pastor says, no, I don't want you talking to those shady Christians over there in the, I don't know, Methodist church. I'll say that because I am Methodist. Well, that's problematic because if we, to the extent that we have a robust theology of the body of Christ, we will avoid cult-like behavior. To the extent that a group says, I know we're only 72 members right now, but we're pushing to become the 144,000 because we're the elect and we're the only ones.
Right.
Then you got problems.
Yeah.
Eat the donuts, but don't drink the Kool-Aid when you go to those meetings.
That's good life advice when dealing with cults, for sure. Yeah, no, that's really, really helpful and a good way to keep in check that pull towards insularity that can genuine religious fervor can breed that as a side effect. I deal with that with relating with Christians. The ministry I do for single adults, we have Christians from all denominations, and we have some that are just like convinced that the others aren't Christians because they're a different denomination or a different tradition in historic Christianity, and having to kind of model that to people, like talk to each other, like ask each other questions, listen to each other. You can pretty much tell after a while if somebody's genuinely seeking to follow Jesus or wrapped up in some unbiblical cult. That's great advice. That's really good advice. Viewers, rewind and re-listen to that answer again. Meditate on it.